So this is basically it. This one is soldered on, this one is soldered on, and the middle one spins. You can use different colored metals if you want. You could solder bumps on this middle one if you want, so it'll make it a little more user-friendly to spin it. But that's the idea. We're going to make what I call a spinner ring. We're going to start with a 7mm wide, 1mm thick shank. Get your ring size, add 1mm, multiply by pi. This will give you the length. Cut it, make sure the ends are square. Anneal it, pickle it, bend it around into a ring, solder it. When you get the ring size that fits you, measure the inside diameter on the knife edge of this, not down inside here, because that'll give you the wrong size. So out here, add 1mm and multiply by pi. Brace the shank against your bench peg. File it flat, measure the length, use the square to mark it, cut it with your saw and file it again. Use your ring bending pliers, flat, half round, come in from the end, leave the round bit on the inside of the ring, bend it into a rough oval, make sure the ends fit perfectly. If they don't fit, cut down through here with your saw. When you have a perfect join, hold it in your third hand, joint up, flux it, 3 bits of solder across the join, solder it. So you've soldered your main ring. What we're going to do now is make the 3 smaller rings that go over the outside. 2 of them need to be a perfect fit. And this shank that we're using is 1.35 high. So what we can do is we take our original size ring, we've added 1mm to it for the thickness of the metal. Now we can take that dimension, add another 1.35 and multiply by pi. And 2 of these will be that length. These need to fit very snugly because they'll end up being soldered on. One of them will make another 0.5 to 1mm longer. That'll go on the inside and that'll be our spinner ring. That's the one that'll move. So make your 2 now that are the perfect fit and pickle them, sand them, make them all nice and pretty. And when you get to a satin finish, 400 grade paper, stop and we'll assemble them onto the ring. Once you've cut your smaller rings to the proper length and annealed them and bent them around, if the joint isn't perfect, saw through it, make it perfect, solder them. You can perch your solder up on top of this if you want to. It's easier to pick solder it. 2 pieces of solder. Bring this up to temperature until the flux goes clear. Place your solder in with the pick. Done. Quench that, pickle it, and do the next one. Flux the join. Pick up your solder, bring that up until the flux goes clear. Place your solder. Quench it and pickle it. I've taken the first ring out of the pickle, the broad one, round it up at this point, If the solder joint is good, just tidy it up with your sanding stick, and we'll take the other rings out of the pickle, round them up, and fit them onto this ring. Use the rawhide hammer, round it up, turn it over, round it up on the other side so that it's not tapered. Follow the curve of the ring using your sanding stick. And if you've done it correctly, you should have an invisible solder joint. Hallmark this now, opposite your solder mark. Tidy that little bump up with your soldering stick, and we're ready to fit the other ones to it. Go all the way around using the sanding stick, because we want this to be flat. Okay, then we can sand the edge, putting paper on the bench. Shift this. So just sandpaper on the bench, tidy that up. It doesn't have to be perfect at this point, but it would be nice to know that it was flat and that you didn't have an ugly gap where your solder was. So at this point, we can do the other two rings that fit it snugly. Dry the rings after you've taken them out of the pickle. Round them up on the ring mandrel, and then we'll check them for fit against this. So just the rawhide hammer. And because these are fairly thin, what we'll have to do after we round them up is make sure that they're not wavy. After you get these rounded up, put them on your bench plate. If they're not flat, take a bench block, put it on the top, and just give it a good whack. So I've checked my rings for fit, and they're slightly small, so I'm going to stretch them. And on these, I'm going to stretch them and put a pattern in them. So for one of them, I'm going to use the cross pane hammer. And check these fairly often because you don't want it too big. Yeah, just a hair more. So I hammered this one up using my cross pane hammer, so it's a nice snug fit now. And that's good because we'll solder this one in place. At this point, make the next one so that it fits. It's a nice snug fit. I need to hammer it up, and I think on this one what I'll do is I'll hammer it up with a round hammer so I get a slightly different texture. Okay, we've got the two outer rings, which are a nice snug fit now and ready for soldering. Now at this point we're going to make the inner ring slightly bigger. So we're just going to measure this, add the thickness of our metal, multiply by pi, and then give it another millimeter to make sure that it spins freely. Now when you finish your last ring, tidy this up with sandpaper inside and out. These other two rings, I didn't tidy the inside because they're going to be soldered onto the main ring anyway. This one we don't want any excess solder on because we don't want to accidentally solder it. This one we want to spin. Now I think what I'm going to do is cut a few marks across this with my saw and then polish it up, and then we'll put it on. So at this point, solder the outside ring on, And what we want is a minimal amount of flux on the outside, 3 or 4 bits of solder just on this edge. Solder it, pickle it. Put this one on that you've finished. Put the next one on, set it up. Just a minimal amount of flux on the outside edge, 4 bits of solder, easy solder in this case, easy solder on this one. Because everything else is hard solder. You know, if we use easy on these outside bits, it shouldn't solder anything except the outside bit, and it shouldn't open up any joins. And when we get finished, those will be soldered and this middle piece will spin. So this is basically it. This one is soldered on, this one is soldered on, and the middle one spins. You can use different colored metals if you want. You could solder bumps on this middle one if you want, so it'll make it a little more user-friendly to spin it. But that's the idea.